Today, we're going to talk about something that many people experience in relationships, but often struggle to understand: the silent treatment. At some point in life, most people have encountered it. You try to speak to someone, but they ignore you. You send a message, and there is no response. You enter the room, and they act as if you are invisible. The silence itself becomes the message, and that message can feel incredibly painful. The silent treatment often leaves people feeling confused, rejected, and emotionally distressed. You may begin asking yourself questions like, did I do something wrong? Why are they ignoring me? How do I fix this? But understanding the psychology behind the silent treatment is important, not because the behavior should be excused, but because recognizing the pattern helps you understand what is really happening emotionally and psychologically. And sometimes, understanding the pattern is the first step toward protecting your emotional well-being. The silent treatment is a form of communication through absence. Instead of expressing feelings directly, someone chooses silence. They stop responding. They stop engaging. They withdraw their presence and attention. And because human beings are deeply wired for connection, this sudden withdrawal can trigger strong emotional reactions. Our brains interpret social rejection in ways that are very similar to physical pain. Studies have shown that when someone feels excluded or ignored, the brain activates regions associated with distress. That's why being ignored by someone we care about can feel so overwhelming. It is not simply uncomfortable. It can feel deeply personal. But why do people use the silent treatment? There are several psychological reasons, and understanding them does not mean the behavior is healthy. It simply means we are trying to understand the underlying patterns. One common reason is emotional avoidance. Some people struggle with conflict. When disagreements happen, they feel overwhelmed by strong emotions such as anger, frustration, or disappointment. Instead of communicating those feelings, they withdraw. Silence becomes their coping strategy. For them, avoiding the conversation feels easier than confronting the issue directly. But while this may feel like emotional protection for the person withdrawing, it often creates emotional distress for the other person. The problem remains unresolved, and communication breaks down. Another reason people use the silent treatment is emotional punishment. Sometimes silence is not about avoiding conflict. It is about expressing anger without speaking. Instead of saying, "I'm upset with you," the person chooses distance and silence. The goal may be to make the other person feel the consequences of the conflict. In this sense, silence becomes a form of punishment. The message becomes, "You hurt me, so I will withdraw from you." This kind of response can create a power imbalance in the relationship, because the person receiving the silent treatment may feel desperate to repair the connection. They may apologize repeatedly. They may try harder to please the other person. And slowly, the emotional dynamic shifts. In some cases, the silent treatment can also become a form of control. By refusing to communicate, someone can create uncertainty and anxiety in the relationship. The person being ignored may become increasingly focused on regaining the other person's attention. They may replay conversations in their mind. They may question their behavior. They may start blaming themselves. This dynamic gives emotional power to the person who is withdrawing, because silence creates tension that only they can resolve. When communication becomes a tool for control, the relationship stops being emotionally balanced. Another psychological factor involved in silent treatment behavior is attachment style. People develop different emotional coping strategies based on their early experiences with relationships. Individuals with avoidant attachment tendencies often cope with stress by distancing themselves emotionally. When conflict arises, they may shut down rather than engage. For them, silence feels safer than vulnerability. Expressing emotions may feel uncomfortable or even threatening, so they withdraw instead. However, partners who value open communication may experience this withdrawal as rejection. This difference in emotional coping styles can create serious misunderstandings in relationships. One person believes they are protecting themselves. The other person feels abandoned. It is also important to understand the emotional impact of the silent treatment. For the person experiencing it, the silence can feel incredibly destabilizing. Humans naturally seek reassurance and connection. When communication suddenly disappears, The mind tries to fill the gap with explanations. People often assume the worst. They may start believing they are the problem. They may begin doubting their own memory of events. They may question whether they misunderstood something. This internal confusion can slowly erode emotional confidence. Over time, repeated silent treatment can damage trust in the relationship. Because emotional safety depends on the ability to communicate openly. It's important to make a distinction here. Not all silence is unhealthy. Sometimes people genuinely need space to calm down and process emotions. Taking time to reflect can actually help prevent arguments from escalating. But healthy space looks different from the silent treatment. Healthy space involves communication. Someone might say, "I need a little time to calm down before we talk." That statement communicates both distance and respect. The silent treatment, on the other hand, removes communication completely. There is no explanation, no timeline, no reassurance, just absence. And that absence creates confusion and emotional distress. Over time, repeated silent treatment can create unhealthy patterns in relationships. The person receiving the silence may become increasingly anxious about conflict. They may avoid expressing their own feelings in order to prevent being ignored. They may start walking on emotional eggshells. This slowly shifts the relationship dynamic. Instead of both people feeling safe to communicate, one person becomes responsible for maintaining emotional stability. Healthy relationships cannot function under those conditions, because emotional safety requires openness. If you find yourself experiencing the silent treatment in a relationship, it is important not to immediately assume that everything is your fault. People's behavior is often shaped by their own emotional habits and coping strategies. Sometimes silence reflects someone's difficulty with communication rather than something you did wrong. This does not mean your feelings are invalid, and it certainly does not mean you deserve to be ignored. Healthy relationships involve mutual respect. Even during conflict, disagreements are normal, but respectful communication should always remain possible. It's also important to remember that silence does not resolve conflict. Problems that are ignored rarely disappear. They simply remain beneath the surface, waiting to resurface later. Communication is the only way relationships grow and heal. Without it, emotional distance increases, and trust slowly begins to weaken. Recognizing this pattern can help you evaluate whether a relationship dynamic is healthy or harmful. Understanding the psychology of the silent treatment is not about excusing the behavior. It is about recognizing emotional patterns. When you understand the pattern, you are better able to protect your emotional well-being. You are also better able to recognize when communication in a relationship needs to improve. Because healthy relationships are not built on silence. They are built on honesty, respect, empathy, and the willingness to address difficult conversations together. And finally, it's important to remember this. If someone repeatedly uses silence as a way to punish, control, or distance themselves from you, that behavior is not a sign of emotional maturity. You should never feel invisible in a relationship. You should never feel afraid to express your thoughts or emotions. Everyone deserves relationships where communication is possible, even during disagreement. Understanding these patterns can help you set healthier emotional boundaries. And sometimes, simply recognizing what is happening can bring clarity and emotional strength. Because healthy relationships are built on connection, and connection cannot grow in silence. If you found this video helpful, consider subscribing for more content about psychology, human behavior, and relationship dynamics. And if you've ever experienced the silent treatment in a relationship, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. Your experiences might help someone else realize they are not alone.